Good evening, everybody. I'd heard of Mr. Sherman's generosity, but I didn't know that he's equally generous with his words. But it so happens that when I meet a generous person, the words fall in my share, the actual generosity lands somewhere else. So that has been my destiny. Anyway, before we start the presentation, I would like to share a picture with you, the picture which actually inspired the topic for this evening. And it's a picture which basically brings about a strong emotion of equity and fair play. I hope this is the right one. Yeah. Would you dim the lights, please? Now, this picture has been taken from a village which is not far from Jaipur. And the lady in which you are seeing is from the Bishnoi community. It's a community which believes that animals and humans are equal. But for me, it demonstrates something more. It demonstrates an equitable jurisprudence, a jurisprudence which is full of compassion, a jurisprudence where there's complete fair play and equality. And this is how I look at it. And this is what justice, in my view, should be. This is how I visualize justice, whether in India or anywhere else, in all the countries put together. And this picture actually won an award. I must acknowledge, it has been taken by Mr. Himanshu, and he's the one who got and brought it to our benefit. The subject which I've chosen today is reality and law, animal welfare in India. Now, when we talk of law, or we try to understand law, it is very important that each one of us, that before we understand law, we should know what the reality is. Because reality is the mischief which the law seeks to check. And therefore, in order to understand law, what I've done is I've taken some pictures of reality, and then we can go to the law, and then we can go as to the role of judiciary is concerned. Now, for example, let's take, as far as reality is concerned, we all, in India at least, there are quite a large number of population for whom cow is a holy animal. But birth of a cow in an urban dairy, fact is a living hell. It's a living hell. Now, if you look at the conditions, they are not very conducive. They're just piled up. The pictures get worse as it. Now, this is where you normally see cows and buffaloes and the kind of the situation they are in. And this is, they're left, and there's hardly any place to move, and they're stuck there. Now, this is as far as the living condition is concerned. But then what happens with science? There's something known as artificial insemination which comes in. And believe me, this is one weapon by which the maximum amount of cruelty has ever been caused. Because the need for bulls has been taken away. Now, once if you take away the need for bulls, what happens is the economics starts playing. The female calf is tied up and is occasionally permitted to suckle, and the male one is tied up and is gradually starved to death because it's got no economic value at all. This is a starving calf, which you can see in Delhi Dairy, which was a picture taken in November 2006. And these are the ones, the male ones, who could not make it, and this is how they're transported. Now, this is as far as the male version is concerned. Now, this production, because we are basically thinking of cow means milk, which is totally based on economics. And the normal cycle of a calf is anything, as far as India is concerned, anything between 10 to 12 years of productive life. But because of repetitive insemination, birth, milk, little bit of break, and thereafter, you again get it. So the productive life of a cow reduces from 10 to 12 years to 5 to 7 years, and at times maximum 8 years. So what do you do with a cow which has now become unproductive? So the only thing which you do in an urban city is you just let loose on the streets. And when it let loose on the streets, it ends up next to the garbage bins. And the garbage bins are full of plastic, nail, blades, and all sort of things. And just the city of Delhi alone, forget about the rest of the cities are concerned, Delhi alone has something like 20,000 abandoned cows on its streets. And I remember just the other day when I was sitting down, somebody said, oh, when I went to Delhi, the traffic stopped because the cow had to pass. That's a myth. It's been stopped not for any other reason, because it's an obstruction on the road. There's no love affection is concerned. Now, if the stomachs are opened up, you'll notice the kind of things which come out from the stomach. You see all plastic. You see all here plastic. And I've got a slightly bigger picture version of this. Now see the contents. It's unbelievable. All what you see is this, the blue, this portion, that is all plastic. And it is this plastic which gets choked and which eventually leads to a horrible, painful death. And this is what we call a holy cow. Anyway, unfortunately, the story of the cattle does not end there. Now, if you look at the transportation, it's the most, if you see this, the way it has been tied up, it's being carried in a truck. This is how it is tied up. This one also from the nose, And this is worst. I don't know whether is this clear? Can you see this clearly? Now, you'll see the back out here. There's a head on top of that. There's a head, another head. This one could be a bit stronger, so it found its way out a bit. And there will be anything, I mean, I've tried counting it, I could not count it, but I think it will be anything over 40 in this truck, just in one truck. So you can imagine the plight of these animals when they're being transported for the purpose of slaughter. And here what do we see? Is this unloading? Normally you're supposed to have a ramp, there has to be proper system in place. But this is how the poor thing is being unloaded. And the ones who were weak and unfortunate, they end up in this shape and form. And now they're taken to a slaughterhouse. This is what a small town slaughterhouse looks like. I did not want to show the pictures of the bigger ones, the Delhi ones I have, but Delhi ones have improved. But a small town slaughterhouse, so you'll find a child who's there. You'll find this is one of the instruments which is used. And there's blood and muck, and I don't know. This is the kind of love and affection we have for animals. This is horrible. This one has just been slaughtered. This is yet to be slaughtered, has been pinned down. And this one is waiting to be slaughtered. And all three in one picture. And here you see this gentleman who is waiting, most probably looking towards this man, because he is heading towards this particular animal. And we find a lady who's maybe discussing about what price she is going to get and buy the product. This is the cattle part of it. Now we come to the chickens. Chickens, as we all know, it has got a lot of cognitive abilities. It's better than and more advanced than cat, dogs, and some other primates. But there's one thing which I find it very, very amazing. The first birth a little chick goes through is debeaking. Out here you'll see the ones which have been debeaked and the ones which have not been debeaked. And why? Because obviously when you put them in confinement in restricted areas, they're bound to get agitated and they're bound to peck each other. So they don't peck each other or harm each other, because you lose that chick and lose the money on it, so you debeak them. This is a broiler chicken run. It's got 3 rows, 1, 2, 3, and they'll be kept here for their life because they can't be removed. There's no place to remove them till they're taken for the purpose of slaughter. And you can imagine the feces and the amount of ammonia that must be generating from this exercise. And if you look at the poultry, the way it is shooting up, which is more shocking, because coming from a country like India, which is known for ahimsa. In 1992, we had 307 million. In 1997, we had 347 million. In 2000, up to 489 million, out of which the broilers, the kind which we saw just now, are 450 million. And the backyard poultry, which is far more the free-range ones, is just now limited to 39. It's a shocking state of affairs. If you look at now, this is the form of transport of a chicken. Whatever the weather be, whatever be the condition is, you're just plonked and taken for purpose of slaughter. And this is how they are weighed. And they are weighed like this because it is easier to tie them with one leg and the other leg is dangling. So they're put in a bunch because they're sold by weight, in this commercial transaction at least. So they're put in a bunch and weighed out here somewhere. Throats are slit by a crude knife, and after they're slit, it's been slit, it is put in this drum where it flaps until it breathes its last. Then it's taken out, it is dressed, and the others which are alive are yet waiting for their turn. It's right in front of them. Can you imagine what these poor animals must be going through? And now, that's the chicken part. I thought we'll just go through some of them. A bullock cart is normally considered a poor man's vehicle in India. But the fact is that in Bombay, even today, there's a century-old practice of supplying kerosene by bullock cart oil tankers. I have no grievance against that. The grievance of mine is that these rich oil companies don't even provide a proper shelter. This is the place which is right opposite a railway station called Sirvi in Bombay, and they're kept there throughout. There's no cover, nothing, whether it's sun, it is monsoons, this is how they're kept. And if you notice out here, if they're tied up, they'll be tied up in this little thing. And we are talking of rich oil companies, and basically they're doing nothing else but, and here's a wound which has been inflicted by this bullock cart, and when they don't move, because they're tired or exhausted or because there's too much heat, the best way to move them is to twist their tail and break it. So you can see the number of points from which the tail has been broken. Zoos. Zoos are considered to be, they're supposed to be, at least in theory, centers for in situ conservation. Is this in situ conservation? Locking up a cage. And here we got a striped hyena. One striped hyena is slightly comparatively endangered than the other ones. So you got a striped hyena cage. And look at this cage. And what do humans do in this cage when they go and visit? Here's a gentleman trying to, I was trying to understand which animal is there. I could not understand. But he's trying to offer a cigarette to an animal which has been caged in. Senseless. These are human actions. And here we have another gentleman who's jumping into a crocodile enclosure, and out here you'll see the crocodile. There's one just behind. This is a crocodile. This is the barrier. This is the boundary wall. Now he wants to go in, and what he wants to do with the crocodile, I don't know. Maybe try to impress some woman who's standing there and admiring his. Now then we come to, for example, this joyride is the most mundane thing I've ever witnessed. So you've got something like over 106 elephants at Amber Fort, which is in Jaipur. So the tourists will come, they'll sit on it, and just about 1.5 or 2 kilometers distance which is to be covered. So they'll go on these elephants because they want to feel like Maharajas. But what is surprising is that this joy which the gentlemen are getting, maybe it lasts for about 10 minutes or 15 minutes, is resulting into a lifelong slavery for these animals, for a 15-minute joy ride. I think it's the most unfair situation between species, between the human species and the animal species. And the weapon which is, the instrument which is used to drive the elephant is this iron rod which is pointed, this is again pointed, and it creates lots of unnecessary, because there are wounds and things like that, which they were all recorded. I need not trouble you with the details of the wounds, but there's one example which is here about the injuries which are caused by this instrument. Then we have another hilarious thing. You want to have, there's something known as the bull race, which I have not understood what is the purpose for the bull race. Anyway, you want to have a bull race. So what they do is they force the bull to consume alcohol. And then you make him race. And the result is this. This is the same picture, but I've enlarged it. Not I've got it enlarged. I'm computer literate, basically. This is how it is done. Now, this is another festival. It's in south of India. It's called Jallikattu. Something like 400 bulls a year are used for this festival. And what is this festival about? The purpose? That they'll tie a money bag around the neck and the horns, and the boys and the young men are supposed to catch hold, pin that poor animal down by whichever means, whether by catching hold of a tail or whatever. And once it's been pinned down, they can take away that bag of money. And something like 400 bulls are used for this purpose. And we call it a festival. Then we have dancing bears, which I'm sure so many of you must have gone to India and seen what a dancing bear is, where it's walking on the hot tar streets with all the smoke blowing out from the trucks. One can imagine. And this part is the most heinous part, just to keep it in check and control. Then we got snake charmers. Despite the fact that all the snakes are endangered, you'll find them in galore. Then we've got poaching. Now, poaching is a very, very serious offense. But the fact is, animals are poached. Cheetah is already extinct. We have got about just 1,400 odd tigers left. And Asiatic lions, you'll find them in pockets in Gujarat. In just one pocket in Gujarat called Gir, which is something they claim is about 300 odd, but the NGOs say it is not more than 270. And for what? So you can have artifacts, you can have dresses, you can have handbags, shoes, whatever, belts. And what is the sacrifice? Sacrifice is you are losing all the wildlife which is there. Then we use animals for experiments, which is a long issue. We'll come to it while I'm dealing with the cases. So this is the reality which I've just, a tip of the reality. Actually, the reality must be much more and far more widespread. Now, if we come to laws, the earliest codified law can be traced to 3rd century BC, when King Ashok wrote. I find it very full of wisdom. 26 years after my coronation, I declared that the following animals would not be killed: parrots, mynas, geese, cranes, bats, queens, and so and so. And all quadrupeds which are not useful or edible, but forests must not be burned. Can you imagine, 3rd century BC, somebody is talking about that you preserve the forest? What foresight, unbelievable. But we are not concerned what the past foresight is, we are concerned with the present and what we are facing in the present and what we can possibly do in the future. Now, we have got the central legislations, we have got the state legislations, and we have got the municipal law, the municipal legislation, which is the council legislations. The main legislation are basically two. The first one is Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act. And the chapter 3 of that act prohibits beating, kicking, overloading, overdriving, torturing, conveying or carrying in a vehicle in such a manner which is subject to pain or suffering, keeping in a cage which does not permit a reasonable space for movement, employing in any work an animal who is unfit to be so employed, keeping chained for an unreasonable time, failing to provide sufficient food, neglecting to exercise, abandoning, mutilating, making it an object of prey, inciting an animal to fight another, or using animals for the purpose of matches. We've got a huge list which we call and term it as general offenses, because chapter 3 deals with general offenses. And what is the punishment? Yes, first offense rupees 50 and subsequent offense rupees 100 or imprisoned up to 3 months. Now this is an act of 1961 and we are in 2008. This 50 rupees is now not more than 50 paisa. If that means not 50 paisa, what would be? We may convert it later. I can't convert it just now. Yeah. And subsequent offense. Nobody keeps a track of the first one. So who will come to know what the subsequent offense is? You will never come to know because you require a register. You require a whole setup to know whether he committed the first one, what was the punishment. Then only you can talk about the subsequent one. So I've never heard of, first of all. So they normally go and pay their 50 rupees and whatever it is. And that's how this law is implemented. Then we have got chapter 4, which deals and regulates experimentation on animals. It conceptualizes an appointment of a committee for control and supervision of experiments on animals. The powers of the committee are: experiments are performed with due care and humanity, experiments on larger animals are avoided, animals are looked after and before and after experiments. This one is important because I'll be dealing with it subsequently, so I'm reading it slightly slowly. Experiments on animals are avoided wherever it is possible to do so, e.g. medical school, colleges, hospitals, etc. Experiments are not performed merely for acquiring manual skill. Chapter 5 of this then regulates training and exhibition of performing animals. This chapter again visualizes a setting up of a prescribed authority, and an animal can be exhibited or trained provided it has been registered. No, I have not finished. No. Okay, then I'll skip all this. Okay. Was it 10, 20 minutes or so? Okay. My apologies. Yes. Now, if we look at, these are the laws. Now, if we look at the role of the judiciary, the role of the judiciary has been very, very powerful. And the power of the judiciary was limited to giving a direction as long as there's a violation of a right. So I'll skip this and I'm just address it to you all. So what they did was they expanded. How do you shut this? Yeah. So what they did was they expanded the scope of rights. And the two words which they took out and expanded was life and liberty. So life and liberty, they said, no, it does not mean just a person's imprisonment or that he can be put to death by following a certain procedure of law. What they said was that life is a far more wide term. It includes all qualities of life. Anything and everything which is required for the fulfillment of life is a fundamental right, which led to large number of decisions, right to travel, right to education, right to health, right to culture, right to ecology. All these are fundamental rights. The other thing which they did was they opened up locus standi. Earlier, it was the same, the conservative view that only the person who has been impacted or who has got a grievance can approach the court. They said nothing doing. We open the courts. The doors are open for anybody to come in and say, this is a public wrong which has been committed by so-and-so, and therefore the court can give a direction that, yes, this authority, which is a public authority, has a duty towards the public to do it. And the court started issuing directions to that effect. So what they did was they opened up locus standi. Third thing they did was they completely diluted the procedural fetters. Even a letter written by an individual to a court would be entertained as a writ petition. And court will seize off it. Now, how to deal with the writ petition? So the court will say, okay, we are taking this letter on board. It is converted into a writ petition. We are appointing so-and-so as an expert committee to go and investigate the allegations which are made in the letter. We are appointing so-and-so as a lawyer to assist the court. So the judge himself would appoint a committee, would appoint a lawyer and say, yes, I'm going ahead because I consider the issue which has been raised in a mere letter which has been addressed to him of a substantial nature. So really, they expanded it. So once they expanded it, it was a matter of time for animal law, for animal welfare issues to come up before the court. And basically, the three instruments which I normally use when I go before the court. And the first instrument is we have a chapter on fundamental duties. The first issue is that because the first weapon which I normally use is because the fundamental duty says that every citizen shall have the fundamental duty to show compassion towards all living creatures. Now that is a big instrument in my hand whenever I come across any issue. The second instrument which I use is that the preamble of the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act says it is an act to prevent unnecessary infliction of unnecessary pain or suffering on animals. The legislature has not defined the word unnecessary. Therefore, what is the scope and content of the word unnecessary? Because if you read it the other way around, the same preamble would read as an act to regulate the infliction of necessary pain and suffering. So you have to co-join the two of unnecessary and necessary. Therefore, anything and everything which I feel is unnecessary, whether it is use of elephants, Amer Fort, or whatever it is, we'll go into that slowly. Okay. I don't know. You want me to? Yeah. No, I didn't know. Was it 10 minutes or half an hour you said? It's over? Okay. No, sorry, I get too carried away with my thing. My apologies. In future, I would be careful. Yeah. So you'll have to bear with me, the panelists would have to bear. Yeah. So what I did, so with these weapons, as for example, I'll give you a simple example of, like performing animals. The court had banned the use of bear, monkeys, and tigers. The circus owners challenged it, saying that it impacts their livelihood to carry on trade. I had the opportunity of arguing this case on behalf of the government of India before the Kerala full bench High Court, before the full bench of the Kerala High Court. And after hearing the court, what beautiful observations of the court are. No person has a right to carry on a trade which results in infliction of unnecessary pain and suffering of animals. Second, exhibiting endangered animals for entertainment is such an obnoxious and pernicious activity which cannot fall within the meaning of the word trade. I mean, these are big things. Ban is to enforce the fundamental duty which I mentioned just now, to have compassion, and its impact on the right to trade is merely incidental. And right to life includes livelihood, but it cannot extend to a trade which is injurious to public interest or has an insidious effect on public morals. No, these are true, and court went on, actually in this, the court expressed an obiter dicta, that means a hope. Obiter dicta is not a binding component or binding ratio of the judgment. The court went on to say, it is not only a fundamental duty to show compassion to our animal friends, but also to recognize and protect their rights. Now, this is the power of the pen which the judiciary controls, and it is that judiciary which needs to be tapped. At least I had the good fortune of doing it. For example, in labeling case, the whole issue came up as to, I remember you mentioned about labeling of food products. It's already done in India, and it was done by the judiciary. The judiciary said, because these are the issues which I raised before the court, whether the consumers have a right of making an informed choice between the products made from animals and non-animal products, whether the non-disclosure violates their right to freedom of conscience, and to issue a direction to the government and manufacturers to protect the rights of conscious consumers by disclosing the ingredients and by affixing a symbol on the packet. And the court agreed, and they gave a direction and held that right to freedom of speech includes freedom to seek and receive information. Right to life and liberty includes the right to know, including the right to sustain and nurture an opinion. That is my opinion for nurturing is that I should know. Then right to freedom of conscience, which is on a different wicket, of the consumers is violated, as they may be unconsciously consuming a product against their faith, beliefs, and opinions. And the court gave a direction that a food would have a vegetable symbol would be green, and a non-vegetable symbol would have a symbol with red. And in India, when you go today, every food packet would have either would have green and red or brown, because there was a big debate. So we said, okay. The court's judgment says red, but then there was some negotiation. They said, no, red appears to be slightly, so we want brown. I said, you want anything? I want green. I'm not giving up green. I said, nothing. So we went through. Then, for example, use of animals in films. And this was, where's that? Yeah. This is where the court held such a beautiful word. Held that no authority can turn a blind eye to the welfare of animals for the specious reason that the mute cannot protest. And gave a direction to that all producers of the film shall seek permission of the Animal Welfare Board of India before shooting the film. It's not that you after shot the film, before shooting the film. And after the film has been shot, there's again a direction. Direction to the censor board, which clears the film, shall not issue a certificate for exhibition of a film without the producer filing a no objection certificate from the Animal Welfare Board of India. So the court put double check. So you can't shoot a film in India now using an animal without first going to the Animal Welfare Board and again going getting a certificate and producing before the censor board. Then, for example, dissection, optional in schools. I remember this girl, Sarika Sancheti, she came over to my chamber. She said, sir, I don't want to dissect. But what can I do? It is mandatory. So I said, what have you done? She said, I've written letters, but nobody responds. So I looked into the law, and we'll skip the law for the time being. There's hardly any time. So I raised several issues before the court, saying, and the issues were whether dissection of animals in school is permissible under the PCA, whether the students have a right of choice in electing to perform a dissection, whether students have a right to conscience while declining to perform a dissection, whether right to life takes within its fold the fundamental duty of every citizen to have compassion for living creatures, whether compulsory dissection of animals in school is an essential and indispensable part of the student curriculum, whether the available computer slides, etc., could be an effective alternative to dissect at school level. The court said we are satisfied with the issues which are raised. We agree with the petitioner and the director, the Solicitor General. Either you do it or we'll do it. We are giving you a choice. So the Solicitor General went, and the case got adjourned, and finally it came from 19th of May 1997. And that's why you will find that the Government of India letter is dated 19th May 1997, and the court direction is also 19th May 1997. And this happened because the case came up in the morning. The judges said, have you brought any document in writing to what we had expressed earlier? They said, we are in the process, we are holding it. They said, no, we are keeping it after lunch, and we want that document. Otherwise, after lunch, we are going to deliver the judgment. So after lunch, this letter was produced where they conceded that matter regarding dissection of elements at the secondary level has been examined in detail, and it has been decided that the dissection may be made optional to students of senior secondary stage, and the existing syllabus will be suitably modified to include alternate activities and experiments. And finally, the court said, no, we are going to make it into an order of the court, because in case you disobey it, you'll be hauled up for contempt. So they said, no, we are going to convert it into order of the court. It was converted into order of the court, and finally on 4th of November, from that day onwards, all the children in India have an option either to dissect an animal or a plant. And all because of the judiciary. That's a very, very proactive role. Airgun license, we can skip. Anyway, I'm running short of time, so yeah. Now, the question is, this is the last which I thought of. Do animals have rights? In my view, animals definitely have at least legitimate right of compassion. For the simple reason, and this is in the Indian context, I'm not putting it in the Australian context, for the simple reason, because if you believe in the theory that every right has a corresponding duty and every duty has a corresponding right, then if you think, and Article 51AG, or the Constitution which deals with, which says it shall be the duty of every citizen of India to have compassion for living creatures, then there has to be corresponding right. But in order to make it a right which is recognized in law, the breach or the disturbance of that right should result in some penal or some action which is a deterrent, which makes you or compels you to perform your duty. And that is there because if you look at Section 3 of the PCA, Prevention of Cruelty, it shall be the duty of every person having the charge of any animal to ensure its well-being and to prevent infliction of pain and suffering. Now, Section 11 says, what it makes is torturing or otherwise treating any animal so as to subject to unnecessary pain and suffering a penal offense. So what it is, so the breach of that duty is an offense. And when we say, don't take so-and-so's life, otherwise you'll be sentenced to jail. So life becomes right because that person will be sentenced to jail for the simple reason that he's not discharging his duty of preserving your life, or seeing that your life is preserved, that your life is not harmed. So we have to look at it. So when I look at it, I'll definitely feel that at least in the Indian context, animals have a legitimate right to be treated with compassion. But out here, what do we mean by compassion? Is it a hollow vessel, or it is a mere rope of sand? Or is it something a vessel which needs to be filled by us and for the generations to come? This vessel called compassion. Thank you.